Good morning, everybody. This is me, Ma. Last week, I shared with you about my wonderful teenage years living at the YWCA and all the fun that I had. So this week, I wanted to share a little bit with you about my traveling companion. But to give you a little bit of background, I guess you would say that I was a romantic. I had read a lot of fairy tales, and I had read a lot of historical romances, and I always dreamed of a tall, dark, handsome man sweeping me off of my feet. But in reality, I never really believed that it would happen, because I did not have any illusions that I was pretty at all. My mom always told me, don't look in the mirror, you'll be vain. And so she wouldn't let me look in the mirror. And I mean, that does not help your hairdos and the things you look like. So anyway, I found out that that was not why I was not popular in school. It was probably my attitude, and she'd always told me not to let a boy know I liked him, because and that'll keep you out of a lot of trouble. But I found out that's not a very good way to attract guys. But anyway, and if a guy ever told me that I was good looking, I didn't believe him, because I didn't trust him. And it might have been because of things that happened in my childhood, but whatever the reason, I figured out that I wasn't looking that bad. And Shirley, my friend, we walked to work together. And she was blonde, and I was a brunette. And whenever we were walking down the street, all the shopkeepers would come out and sweep their sidewalks just as we went by and speak to us and say good morning. So we had a lot of fun turning a few heads while we were in Savannah. So, but anyway, and like I told you, I was having a lot of fun going out. But one day, Shirley and I, again, my friend, we were at Shear's Delicatessen, which was really a restaurant. And we're sitting in a booth, and I'm talking about this drop-dead, good-looking, handsome man walks by, and he says, "Hello, Betty." And I thought, oh, how does he know me? I don't know. Who is this man? I've never seen him before. How does he know my name? I didn't know. But anyway, he went to the far end of the restaurant, and I didn't see him anymore, and so I went on about my business. But it was later on in that week that we went to the Princess Grill. Now, this Princess Grill was where a lot of us had our third meal that I was telling you about last week. And so I was there with probably 3 other girls. We were sitting in a booth, and pretty quick I noticed that I felt somebody staring at me. And I mean, it's like, who is this idiot staring at me? I felt so self-conscious. So I sat there and pretended like I didn't know that he was staring at me. And then I thought, okay, there is a mirror over there behind the bar. And I said, I can look over there and I can see who this is that's looking at me, and he won't know, and I can get a good look of who this is. So I turned my head very gently, and I looked over to the mirror, and there he was looking at me, grinning. So I was so embarrassed, and he continued to look at us the whole time we were eating. And just before he realized that we were getting ready to go, he gets up from the table to go pay his bill. So when we get to the cash register, he's still standing there. And Sonny Kaminsky was the owner of the Princess Grill. And I knew him, but so did Fred. And he introduced me to Fred O'Berry. And Fred was standing there, and he found out a little bit where I worked and knew a little bit about us. And Sonny says, well, if I was a young man and I had a nice automobile, I'd ask these girls if they'd like to have a ride home. And Fred says, well, I guess that means I'm supposed to ask you girls if you'd like a ride home to the YWCA. And of course we turned him down. We weren't about to get in the car with somebody that we didn't know. And so we walked home from the Princess Grill, and he did have an automobile, and he circled all the parks in Savannah. I don't know if many of you know anything about Savannah, but Savannah is laid out, and it's got a park. And just about every block that you go, there's a park in the middle of 2 blocks. And so he followed us home. But we were not threatened by him doing this, because he was just showing interest in us. And it was not like today where you felt like you were being tracked or stalked or anything, so we went on home. But he had found out where I worked, and so in the next couple of days he called me and chatted with me on the phone and asked me if I would like to go out for lunch. Well, I wasn't about to go out to lunch with him because I didn't know him, and he was older than I was. I knew that, and I had never dated anything but boys. I mean, they were about my age, and I knew that he was older. So he called me up two or three more times, and every time he would call, I would have an excuse not to go because I was scared to go out with him. And one time when I told him I wouldn't go, I told him I had plans for lunch. Well, it just so happened that my plans fell through, and I went to the Princess Grill for lunch with Shirley, and I saw him in there. And I thought, oh, I feel so bad. He thinks I'm lying. So by that time, I knew where he worked, and I called him and I said, well, I just wanted to let you know that I didn't mean to lie to you, that I really didn't plan on going out to eat today. I thought I was going with Shirley back to the Y to eat. He said, that's okay, no problem. And I thought, well, that's the last time I'll hear from him. So anyway, a few days later, the phone rang, and it was Fred, and he says, he chit-chatted for a little bit, and he said, by the way, what time do you have lunch? And I said, 1 o'clock. He says, good, I'll pick you up in front of City Hall at 1 o'clock, and hung up. Well, City Hall was just, wasn't even a block away from where I worked. And so I met him at City Hall. So he says, well, where would you like to go? We can go to Anton's, which was a really upscale restaurant, or the Pirate's House, or the Pink House, or where would you like to go? And really and truly, y'all, I did not want anybody to see me out with him because I didn't know that much about him. So I said, can we go anywhere that I'd like to go? And he said, sure. I said, can we go to Joe's Drive-In and get a barbecue? So we went to Joe's Drive-In and got a barbecue. And while we were there, he told me that he had been married before, but he wasn't married, and he had a daughter who was 9 years old, and you know, she lived with her mother, and that he was single and had been for a good 8 years. And so by the time we had lunch and I found out a little bit more about him, I was completely disarmed, and I liked him very much. And so when he left me that day, I was on a Friday, and I had a date with somebody else Saturday. And so he said, well, how about going with him on a yacht that some friends of his had a yacht, and they were going to go out on Sunday, and would I like to go with him? He didn't want to go by himself, you know, to be with them. And so I'd never been on a yacht, so I'm excited, you know, I'm really coming up in the world, I'm going to get to go on a yacht. So I told him yes. And then I got cold feet, and I called my sister who lived in Savannah at the time, and I said, Velma, I'm going out with this guy. And I said, he's older than I am. And I said, I don't know what I'm getting myself into. I said, but I don't come home. I said, I went that away. So, and then I began to worry. I thought, you know, I don't even swim that well. What if he becomes too familiar and I have to get off the boat? I mean, you know, anyway. So Sunday came around, and he came and picked me up, and we went out to Thunderbolt to meet his friends, you know, at the yacht. And so we got there, and he says, well, George and Jewel aren't here yet. Said, let's just go ahead and get on the boat? I said, nope, we'll wait right here. I was about to get on the boat with somebody that I didn't know, you know. I didn't know if they were going to show up or not. And I was worried about whether or not they were going to have alcohol and drinking, and I didn't drink, and I really didn't want to go with anybody that did. So we waited, and pretty soon George and Jewel showed up, and we went out on the boat. And Fred was a target shooter, and he ignored me all day long. And he had the pistol with him, and he would shoot different things, you know, just plinking is what he called it, you know, and it wasn't any danger in it. But I should have known right then that he was more interested in guns than he was in me, but I didn't really get that idea. So anyway, we got back, and worrying about something to drink, they didn't even have any refreshments on the boat. And I thought, well, foot on this, you know, but anyway, we got back home, and when he let me out, he asked me if I'd like to go to a movie that night. Well, I wanted to see the movie, and I thought, why not? So I went to the movie, and we saw the movie, and that was the beginning of our relationship. And he became a very special person in my life. All my girlfriends that lived with me at the Y, shortly after I started dating, oh, Betty, he's in love with you and all this. And I said, we haven't been dating that long. I mean, they were saying this, and I'd only been out. Of course, I went out with him every night, because once we started dating, he'd say, well, I'll see you tomorrow night at a certain time. So we met on October the 30th, and my mom and dad came down and had Thanksgiving with my sister Velma and her husband, and I introduced them to Fred at that time. I'd already told them about him, and I was singing all of his praises, and Mom said, what's wrong with him? I mean, she didn't ask me. I'd already told her all these good things. She says, what's wrong with him? I said, well, he has been married before. But anyway, when they met him at Thanksgiving, they said, well, after he had left, they said, well, I think he'd make Betty June. That's what middle name is, June. May make Betty June a good husband. I said, y'all talk like I'm going to marry him. I said, I hadn't been dating him except less than a month. So this was Thanksgiving. And so we had gone home to see Mom and Dad after that. And on December the 10th, which was about 40 days, Fred asked me to marry him. And he told me, he said, I've already talked to your daddy about it. So anyway, I agreed to marry him. And on December the 25th, he gave me a ring. And so in less than 2 months, I had met him. I had fallen in love with him. He'd asked me to marry him, and we made plans to get married. No one ever told me that I was to marry a Christian. And I thought if a man didn't smoke or drink or chew or go with those that do, that they had to be a Christian, because that's what I believed. I did not know any better. I didn't know that the Bible says to not be unequally yoked with a non-believer. And I just assumed that Fred was a Christian because he acted like a Christian to me. Everything he did was perfect. I mean, I had found somebody, my idol, my Prince Charming, tall, dark, and handsome, and oh, so romantic. I mean, I'd fallen in love. And but when I said my bedtime prayers, I might have added something on the end to now I'll lay me down to sleep. But I know that I never really asked the Lord to guide me and direct me into who I was to marry. Now, I made one of the most important decisions in my life without consulting the Lord to see if this was who He wanted me to marry. So I didn't give it that much importance. So my prayers was more of a ritual or a wish list. I was living the fairy tale life. I had my knight in shining armor, and he was going to love me, and we were going to live happily ever after. So that tells you about how Fred and I met. And so next week, I'll tell you about when my journey with Fred really begins. Listen, like, comment, share, and subscribe. It doesn't cost anything.